Welcome back, guys, to another episode. If you are listening, hello. If you are watching, hello again. You might notice that I'm in a different place today, not at my desk. So we'll see how that goes. It's kind of throwing me a little bit. So in today's episode, we are going to be talking about essay writing, which I have covered quite a bit in the last few episodes and also in my content on Instagram and on my emails because, well, a few reasons. Firstly, because I have a new training called the Essay Fix that is open for enrollment today, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But if you head to my website or if you head to the links in the episode description, you will find that. But I also want to talk about it because essay writing, if you are studying a course that has a lot of assignments, then it can really take over your time, your energy, your headspace, because you work on an essay, you submit it, and then you immediately have to start the next one. So if you are struggling with your essays, you find them overwhelming, you find them difficult, your marks aren't where you want them to be, then it was understandable that that might have a weight on your shoulders at all times. I definitely went through a phase of feeling like all I'm doing is like getting to the next essay and then trying to have a rest for like a day. Sometimes it felt like I could only rest for like an hour before I had to start working on the next one. And a lot of students, I find, kind of blame themselves when actually the problem is the system or the support, or they're just missing the right approach. And so that's obviously what I'm here for. That's what my new training is here for. And in this episode, I'm going to be sharing some ideas around 5 reasons why essay writing might feel like a slog and what you can do about each of them. So, reason number 1, which I've touched on in some of the recent episodes, is that you are never taught how to actually do it properly. You're never taught how to write essays properly because school focuses on delivering a lot of content to you in a lot of subjects, right? The focus is very much curriculum. So there's not a huge amount of time to focus on teaching academic writing skills. Similarly, in university, you may not even have a huge amount of taught elements in your course, right? Taught elements being where you were getting direct teaching from lecturers. Some of you are studying more like self-paced courses or hybrid courses. And so when you do have taught elements, it's normally, again, giving you content, giving you theory. The actual, learning how to write academically, that is kind of expected that you'll pick it up, or it's kind of expected that you will get better with each essay that you do based on the feedback. Now, that isn't that helpful because I don't know about you, I was quite often given vague advice or vague feedback, like just answer the question, be more critical. Sometimes I would email my tutor as I was working on an assignment and say, I don't think I understand the question. Like, could you offer some advice? And sometimes I would get, a good, helpful answer. And sometimes I would just be told, just read the guidance again carefully, which is not that helpful. And also, if you're not taught how to read the guidance carefully, it's just frustrating. And you can feel like you're missing something, but you can't quite name what that is, right? And so that's why I've created this training, the Essay Fix, because instead of you just feeling like you're expected to magically know how to do things like unpack a question, plan strategically, write critically, structure your arguments so they flow and they build towards a sensible conclusion and they actually answer the question, that is what I'm going to actually teach you in the Essay Fix. It is a training that consists of 2 workshops, and those workshops are split into how do you write the right essay, the correct essay. So that's all around kind of breaking down the question, deciphering the guidance, understanding the scope of the question, what to include, what not to include, like what are all the tick boxes, and then helping you plan out your reading and note taking in the best way possible so that you can actually write the right essay. And then the second training is all around how to write a better essay that's at the right level. And by level, I mean some essays are more like description, explanation, outlining theory, and then others are application, applying theory to examples. And then there is obviously higher level essays that are all about criticality, so evaluating, discussing, analyzing. And so we need to learn what those levels are, what is expected at those levels, and then how to actually do those things. So yeah, I think you can kind of see here that like you've not been taught how to do this. I wasn't taught how to do this, but that is why I'm here. There is an answer. It's not that you're not clever enough. It's not that you're not good enough to be studying at this level. It's that there are gaps in your skills, and those are fillable gaps. So reason number 2 why essay writing might be feeling like a slog right now is that you're studying for your essays in the wrong way. Now, all of these are through no fault of your own. I want to just keep reiterating that point because I know that education can be a space that induces quite a lot of shame, and that is not what I'm about. So, yes, if you're studying for your essays in the wrong way, that's through no fault of your own. Because a lot of universities, they might give you an idea of kind of week by week what you should be doing, right? So they might tell you, okay, go to these lectures each week or read these things each week. And yes, that's helpful in some respect, but it often will put you into a non-strategic mindset where they're missing out a few bits of the story here, where most students I see, they will prioritize their time on doing all the reading, taking notes, like getting all of the stuff done that they're told they need to do. And then, as that assignment deadline gets closer and closer and closer, that panic creeps in. And so then they have whatever time is left after the reading and note taking to plan, write, and edit an essay. And I don't know about you, but that's not enough time. And those feelings of like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get this essay done? It's that feeling of like dread hanging over you. That's not helpful. So I definitely recommend kind of flipping it around so that the assignments are the thing that is prioritized. So when you start studying a new block or a new unit of work that you're going to be tested on with one or more assignments kind of towards the end or whenever, rather than thinking, right, let me start the reading, let me start the note taking, like let me learn the material first and then I'll work on the assignments later, because that plays into that procrastination mindset that's quite easy to fall into, isn't it? Instead of that, we want to prioritize the assignment early on. So before you start studying any of the relevant material, I want you to look at that question, look at that guidance, break it down, decipher it, and work out what is it you actually have to do? What is the task? Now, you don't need to know any of the content yet because you've not been taught it. But even if you don't know that content, you should be able to, from the guidance and the question, at least have an understanding of the task. And that way, you can look at, okay, here's the reading that they've suggested. Let me prioritize that, right? Let me be strategic. Let me kind of split it into 2 piles of like, okay, this is definitely relevant for the upcoming assignment. This is not so relevant. And that might mean then that you actually can spend less time reading. It will mean that your notes are a lot more strategic because I don't know about you, I used to write a load of notes because I thought that's what good students did. And then I would come to work on the assignment and I would look at my notes and I'd realize that they weren't actually helpful. Quite often they were just copies of the book or they just didn't quite align with the question. And so what I would end up doing is putting those notes aside and just returning back to the textbooks or the articles or the videos. So those notes were absolutely pointless. The method that I teach and the method that I will be walking through in the essay training as well is actually taking notes with the essay question in mind. So breaking the essay question down into like sub questions, into topics, that allow you to structure your note-taking. So in effect, you are creating a study guide for your assignments as you go, so that when it comes to actually starting to plan and then write your assignment, you've got a much smaller amount of strategic aligned notes that are actually going to help you. So again, that's what we're going to cover in the first workshop of the essay fix. Okay, the third reason why essay writing might be feeling difficult and hard and not very nice is that there is no room to practice. Now, I had this thought recently that of how netball, the sport netball, is similar to essay writing in this sense. So bear with me here. So I've been part of a netball team for 7 years now. And when I joined this team, I hadn't played netball since school and I couldn't really remember any of the rules. And I felt quite nervous, but I was like, it's fine. I'm going to join this netball team and I'm going to practice, right? Wrong. That is not what this team is for. This team is literally, you just show up and then your entire time is just playing a match against another team. And then every single match counts towards your standing in the league. And then by the end of that season, whoever has got the most points wins. And that's very high stakes, right? Because even now, when I've been doing it for 7 years, like I'm still learning as I go. I'm learning how to be a better netball player, but there is no practice. There's no drills. There's no opportunity for coaching. There's no opportunity for me to learn and make mistakes without it counting towards the league standings. You know, every goal that I don't get in when I'm shooting counts and like impacts our score. And that was quite frustrating. And I realized that that's not how I like to learn. Like, I like to learn by doing, but I don't like it to be so high stakes all the time. Um, so I actually took it upon myself to practice outside of the games. So I would look up on YouTube, I would look up kind of videos for ideas and strategies for how I could be a better shooter and how I could, you know, find space around the defender. I would go practice. So I got a hoop and I would practice. I would do different like agility drills at the gym and I would kind of strengthen my muscles so that I would be better. And I found that that was when I made the most progress because yes, you will learn by doing, but in a low stakes environment, I think it's easier. So this is how it's actually related to essays, that your assignments are in a high stakes environment. So what I mean by that is you write an assignment that then you get feedback on it, and then that feedback should help you with the next assignment. But if you get a grade that you're not happy with, and then if the feedback you get isn't that helpful and you aren't able to increase your marks for the next essay, or you only increase it by a few, or even you go down, then all of that is counting towards your final grade. Now, everyone's university is slightly different, but what tends to be the case in the UK is that your first year of full-time university doesn't count towards your final degree classification, that things start counting in the second and third years of full-time study. If that's the case, this is still a relevant point because if you're getting, say, marks in the 50% in first year, yes, those may not count, but you're not going to magically jump to 60, 70, 80, 90 in the second year when the marks do count, right? You 100% can jump that high. Like I work with students all the time who jump 20, 30, 40% in their grades after I teach them how to write essays better. But that's not going to happen without some work, right? Without you skill building. So even in first year, when those grades don't count, they kind of do, because if nothing changes, those are the grades you're going to get in second year. And there's actually an argument that the grades in second year would be lower if you haven't improved your skills because they expect more from you. So this is to say that I don't really agree with this, that assignment writing at universities is very high stakes because every single one that you submit is getting you closer to your final degree classification, but you're not getting enough of the support and enough of the training to actually help you improve your skills along the way. So that's another reason why I've created this training, the Essay Fix. You can almost think of it as your practice court, right? Where you're going to learn the skills before the next match starts. So the trainings, it's 2 workshops that are 2 hours long each. So 4 hours you can join live. There's different options to join live. You can also catch up with the recordings. You get lifetime access to the recordings as well. And during those hours, you are in a low stakes practice ground with me and the other students who are enrolled. So what I mean by that is I'm going to walk you through different methods and techniques. I'm going to show you lots of examples from different subjects to help you understand the methods and see how they apply. Then I'm going to set you activities. These are activities that, there's no group work. You don't have to talk to anyone. You can do them by yourself. And you're going to get time during these workshops to have a go. So have a go with exactly what I've just walked you through. So it might be breaking down an assignment question and picking out the keywords or the tasks. So you're going to have a go with the examples, and then you come back, and anyone who feels like sharing can, but I will walk you through the right answers. And if you have any questions or any feedback, I'm there to help you. So it's a very safe space to practice. It's a judgment-free zone completely. And it means that you're going to invest those 4 hours almost like what I was doing with the netball drills, like teaching myself the strategy so that when I next go on the court, I'm going to be a better player. So joining these workshops means that you get that chance to practice. And then when you next write an assignment, whether that is, literally a day after those workshops, or whether it's in a few months or a few years, you are going to be a better essay writer, which means that your results are going to be better. So reason number 4, the essay writing might feel really hard, is that you are relying on outdated or confusing frameworks. Now, an example here is the Peel framework, P-E-E-L. You may have heard about this. You may use it. It is a framework that most universities, most academics will recommend as a way to structure your paragraphs. Now, there's a few variations of it, but realistically, it means P for point. You make a point in your paragraph. Then E for explanation. So you explain your point. And then the next E sometimes stands for evidence, sometimes stands for evaluation. So that's where you bring in references and sources to back up your claims. You might have to evaluate, offer that critical piece. And then the L stands for link. So that's where you either link the idea to the next paragraph, or you link that paragraph back to the question. Now, I'm not a big fan of Peel because I think it's quite vague. I think it's also very rigid, and I don't think it actually it's not a helpful framework in that it doesn't actually teach you how to do any of those things. So by being told Peel, just use Peel, it doesn't teach you how to know what to put your point as. Doesn't actually teach you that. It doesn't teach you how to explain your ideas in a efficient way, in a way that gives enough detail without using up word count. It doesn't really tell you how to evidence your ideas. It definitely doesn't teach you about critical thinking or evaluation. And then in terms of linking, that was also not very clear. Like, how do you link back to the question? How do you effectively link to the next paragraph? So I don't like it, right? I think it's unclear. I think it can sometimes be contradictory. Instead, what you need is flexible, reusable tools that you can use to plan and structure your paragraphs to make sure that you're saying meaningful things. And so in the Essay Fix, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk you through better tools for structuring your paragraphs, structuring your points, planning your ideas, like analyzing the material. You're going to learn better methods for it. And another kind of part of this training is I didn't want it to just be you learn some stuff from the videos and then off you go. You get lifetime access, so you can go back to the videos if you find it helpful. I'm also creating a lot of resources for you. So this is things like sentence starters, templates, like word banks, different guides, lots of worked examples. So if I'm teaching you how to structure paragraphs or how to break down essay questions, I'm also going to show you like worked examples for different subjects so that you can see my thought process and then apply it to your own subject. Because again, this is something that is missing in university support, is showing you what good essay writing actually looks like. It's very rare that you'll ever really be given like sample essays. I've had it a few times. I work with some students who get given samples, but those samples sometimes aren't very helpful because they've actually given you samples that aren't the highest grade possible. So you're almost why would you emulate something that's not the best? And then also those examples are not annotated for you to see, this is what was good, this is how you need to do it. Well, that's what I do in my resources. I actually annotate my examples to say, here's a strong introductory sentence for a paragraph. This is why it's being used. This is how you would use it. So you're getting the full resources that you can then apply immediately into your own writing. And then the final reason that essay writing might be feeling like a slog is that you're working hard, but not in the right way. And again, no shame here, no judgment here. You are doing the best you can with the tools that you've been given, with the skills and the strategies that you've been taught. But there's a better way, there's an easier way, there's more efficient ways. Some common traps here: starting to write before you know what you're actually going to say, hoping that it will just make sense as you go, right? That you can open a Word doc, open a blank page, start typing, because you have an idea of like, yeah, I think I want to say this first, and then we'll see how it goes. But that isn't the most sensible plan, because when I'm proofreading essays, and so definitely when your tutor is reading an essay, it's very clear to them if you have not gone about it in a structured way. You don't want your essay to read like, here's an intro, conclusion at the end, and then the few thousand words in the middle is kind of relevant sentence after relevant sentence, but there's no real order to it, right? Instead, we want to have a structure of like arguments that lead to the conclusion. So that's a common trap we can get into. Trying to write and edit at the same time. I talked about this in the recent episode about overwhelm and cognitive load, that we really want to try to either be writing or editing, because writing is a creative skill and editing is an analytical skill. So it's kind of like two different brain processes. And what often happens is if we're writing, so we're trying to like, ideate, get ideas down on the page. If we're constantly like judging ourselves and being like, oh, that word doesn't work, that doesn't make sense here, the order's wrong here, where's this even going to go, blah, 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 like that's really tricky. And then suddenly that creativity just like turns off like a tap. And that's not very helpful. In the same way that if you're in kind of editing mode, you're not going to then be thinking of like great ideas to replace things with. So that's something that you can immediately implement into your own essay writing process, of almost decide, right, for the next 20 minutes or an hour or a few hours, I am either editing, so going back over what I've done, trying to polish how I write things here, make this more concise, compare this to the question and the guidance and see if it's answering the question, see if I can bring in any more evidence here, like that kind of mindset. Or decide whether you're in writing mode. And if you are, then you want to try to increase the flow. So as you're writing, you're not going to be a perfectionist about words. You can say however 30 times, because you know that later you can go back and replace them with different words. You're not going to think about the length of your sentences, whether they're too short, whether they're too long, because you're just going to write and get your ideas down. If you can't think of a word, you can just put a question mark. If you think, oh, I need to actually find a reference here, or I need to find a piece of evidence to back up this claim, you can highlight it in red, or you can add a comment saying find source. You can kind of just do little things to keep yourself in the flow. So that's helpful. Another common trap is cutting words from the wrong places. So I quite often see this where students, let's say their maximum word count is 2,000 words. They've written everything that they think they need to write, and they're at 2,500, and they have no idea what to cut. Now, here, when you're reading over your draft, this is the common trap that students can fall into, is that they end up reading over the stuff that's like description or explanation, where you're introducing theory and explaining it, and they're reading it through and they're going, yep, that makes sense, yep, because it's the easier stuff to digest. And they go, right, yeah, we're going to keep that stuff in. And then maybe they get to the trickier, like the higher level points around like critical thinking, like talking about limitations and however this, and on the other hand, this. And that stuff almost seems easier to cut because it's the stuff that you're not quite sure if it's relevant. You're like, oh, maybe I don't need to say that. Maybe it's enough that I've said this. When actually, that's the kind of trap here, that the stuff that's easiest for you to understand is probably the stuff that you could cut or dramatically reduce the word count. Because for higher level essays that are asking you to critically evaluate or discuss anything like that or analyze, you're not going to get that many marks for the description and the explanation. You have to do it. You can't just jump straight into analyzing a theory if you haven't yet explained it or described it or offered definitions. But those points, those lower points, are just not going to get you as many marks. So this is a trap that we can fall into, of doing lots of things, working hard, putting a lot of effort in, but you're not getting as much bang for your buck, because essay writing has to be very structured. All academic writing benefits from being more structured because every sentence has to earn the right to be there. That's why you get set these word count limits that once you kind of learn, I sometimes hear from students who struggle to meet the word count, and that can tend to be not understanding the task enough, not understanding the level enough to come up with enough points to write. But the more common issue is I have too much to write about in that word count limit. And so actually being more structured helps you to realize that every sentence has to earn the right to be in your essay. And so that means that taking a more structured, deliberate approach is the best thing, because it's going to increase the chances that each sentence is actually useful, right? If you need to describe something, yes, but then you don't waste loads of words describing because you move on to the higher level things. Now, I say this as someone who is not very structured. I don't really like planning. I pack for holidays at the last minute. I'm quite often late for things. I'm quite untidy. So it's not like I'm one of those people that is super, super structured about everything. I'm not, but I've learned that writing, it's so much easier if you do it in a structured way. And so again, that's why I am running these trainings, to offer that kind of these step-by-step methods, these templates, these models that are simple to follow and help you actually turn all of that time and energy and effort that you're putting into your essays into a better process and better marks at the end of it. So there we have it, the 5 reasons why essay writing might be feeling quite difficult for you. So you never got taught how to do it properly at school or at university. You are studying for your essays in the wrong way in terms of your prioritizing reading and note-taking, getting through all the material, when actually we want to flip that around and prioritize understanding the essay question and then studying the relevant material through the lens of that essay question. There's no room to practice your skills. You're in a very high stakes environment of each of your essays is either getting you closer or further away from the final grade that you really want. You're relying on outdated or confusing frameworks like Peel that isn't that helpful and not that clear. And you're working hard, but maybe not in the best, most efficient, strategic way. Now, If any of those resonated, then I hope that this episode has done a few things. It's validated your experience, right? You are not alone in experiencing these struggles, and they are not your fault. It is not your fault that you have not been taught how to write essays in the best way. It is not your fault that the system is not necessarily set up to teach you those skills. However, if you want to change anything about your essay writing, such as your experience about it, your enjoyment of it, your grades that come out of it, then it's on you. It's your responsibility to then find ways of doing that. And so I hope that this episode has also shared some advice and tips that you can immediately implement into your own process to solve some of these problems and make it easier for you. And then you may want to also check out my training, The Essay Fix. So I'll put the links in the episode description and everything. You can reach out to me on Instagram if you've got any questions about it, or you can email me. And I'm super excited to run this training. It's brand new. I have taught essay writing for years and years and years now, but this is a brand new training with new resources, new exercises, new activities, new methods, and I cannot wait. It feels a little bit meta in terms of, I mentioned in a previous episode that I've just completed a qualification in becoming a specialist study skills tutor for neurodivergent students. And so the reason it's kind of meta is that I have gone off in a like kind of low stakes ish practice ground and improved my skills in how I teach students how to study more effectively. And now I am able to implement that into this new training. So this new training being a low stakes ground for you to practice your essay writing skills, which then means that you can take these skills and implement them into your next essays. Very meta, right? So I'm super excited to run this training. I'm not sure when I'm going to run it again because I'm not sure on my schedule yet. So if you're thinking, oh, I won't do it this time because it's towards the end of my academic year, I'll do it when she does it again in October. I don't know when I'm doing it again. And this is why I've offered it as it's, you have the option to join live multiple times. There's 2 different runnings of the workshop, either the 7th and 8th of May, which is a Wednesday, Thursday in the evening, or Saturday, the 10th of May. You can join all 4 of them if you want to, or pick the 2 that suit you. Or if you can't join live, I've heard from a few students that aren't around in that time, then that's fine because you can catch up with the recordings, right? You can watch the recordings and do the activities, use all of the resources, and then you get lifetime access to them. So you can then come back to them, in your next modules, your next academic year to boost those skills. So yes, I hope this episode has been validating and helped you realize that you are not alone in your essay struggles. I hope it has shared some tips and advice that you can immediately implement, and it's shown you that there are opportunities out there to improve your skills so that you can have a better, easier time at university. And if you want to talk to me about any of these options, then my Instagram DMs are always open. Thank you for watching and or listening to this episode, and I will see you in the next one.